All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, one of the most satisfying things about the 2020 presidential campaign is watching the identity politics-obsessed elite wing of the Democratic Party have their hopes dashed before their very eyes with the dying campaigns of Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Deval Patrick. The New York Times, a woke organization itself, couldn't quite figure that out, why exactly black people weren't voting based purely on racial identity lines like they would expect. They sent a reporter to South Carolina and to Atlanta in order to figure that out. And in a story titled, "Black Voters to Black Candidates, Representation is Not Enough," the Times interviewed 24 black voters in Atlanta and across South Carolina, where they found miraculously black voters are just like everybody else. They vote for the candidates which best represent their interests, rather than somebody who just happens to look like them. The Times writes that, quote, "Many articulated a particular disenchantment with the idea that racial representation equated to change, and that they should automatically back a candidate who looked like them." I was cracking up at this particular quote from a voter who told the Times, quote, "If I had a Kamala Harris or Cory Booker that sounded like Bernie Sanders, of course I would choose them, because they're closer to my lived experience. But the Kamalas and the Corys aren't discussing the issues he's discussing." This voter in particular expressed disappointment with Barack Obama, saying, "We heard social justice talk, but he protected Wall Street, not Main Street, and I'm not falling for that again." The Times observed, younger voters in particular, they have embraced the idea supporting a candidate who is willing to upend unjust systems is more important than choosing one from their community. That, in a sentence, is the story of black voters in 2020, evangelical voters in 2016, and many more communities in an increasingly class-divided world. And the reason so many people in the media can't understand that is because they belong to an elite class where everything is already working out for them. Poll after poll reveals to us that the people most likely to view politics through the frame of racial politics are not people of color themselves, but upper middle-class white liberals who have passed through the elite university system. These are the people who populate our newsrooms, they populate the professional managerial class, and they have far too much of an impact on our contemporary political discourse. These are the people who push the idea that a Deval Patrick, Kamala Harris, or Cory Booker was really what black voters want or need. And this is dangerous for everybody. Not only does it push a false racial politics narrative that people of color in this country don't even want, but it allows for excuse-making by bad politicians like this from Kamala Harris a few weeks ago when she blamed race and gender for why she's failing in the Democratic primary. Let's take a listen.
Essentially, is America ready for a woman and a woman of color to be president of the United States?
America was ready for a black man to be president of the United States.
And this conversation happened for him. There is a lack of ability or a difficulty in imagining that someone who we have never seen can do a job that has been done, 45 times by someone who is not that person.
This type of excuse-making blames voters for accurately seeing that Kamala is not offering either an electable case to the American public like Joe Biden or a transformational case for change like Bernie Sanders and, to some extent, Elizabeth Warren. The polling results of today and the life support candidacies of Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are a great corrective to the identity politics-obsessed political class that wonders how an AOC would endorse Bernie Sanders, how older black voters could support Joe Biden, or how younger black women could support an Elizabeth Warren. As the media found out in 2016, people vote for somebody who will best advocate for their interests. It just turns out that most people don't view their interests in purely racial terms. And in a multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-religious democracy like ours, it is a profoundly comforting and optimistic development. And that was really the takeaway that I had, Crystal, is I love seeing this, in which you have older black voters and younger black voters split along not racial lines, but on class lines, on whether they want to maintain a status quo, upend an unjust system, and that's the best part. It's the beauty of the fact that we are all united in an actual class struggle in this country, and that race doesn't actually have quite a bit to do with it, at least on a very superficial level.
Some of those quotes were amazing.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Well, if there was a Kamala who sounded like Bernie Sanders,
sure, I would vote for it.
Yeah, no problem.
I would love to see that, right?
Because at bottom, what does it do for you to have someone who looks more like you selling you out in the same way as the white men. And what does that accomplish?
That's why I said that thing about evangelical voters, because they watch, right? They voted for the guys who were like, oh, they're on our side.
Yeah.
And they go to church and they pray. And then you know why they voted for Trump? Because Trump was like, no, I'm going to ram this thing through and use the court system to actually protect your interests. And look, I know a lot of people watching this don't even agree with that. But people don't have to vote for somebody who looks like them and acts like them. They need to vote for somebody who will fight for somebody like them. And for too long, they voted for people who looked like them and acted like them, who don't actually fight for their interests. They fight for the interests of big corporations.
And Democrats love blaming anyone but themselves. They love to blame the voters. They love to blame Russia. They love to blame anyone rather than admit that the way that they've been doing business for decades has been a disaster politically and certainly a disaster for the working class of America. I mean, there's this like strain of feminism, white feminism, where it's all fixated on like breaking the glass ceiling and let's have, Sheryl Sandberg, and if we can just get women to the top of the corporate chain to do the same bad crap that the men did, then we're going to be good to go. And it's so incredibly shallow and hollow of a way of looking at these things. But if you are someone for whom the system is working out and you want to have this like progressive lens of the world, this is a way to signal that you are progressive and that you get it without actually having your own interests threatened.
What that is all about is about fighting for control of the oligarchy, not actually stopping or ending the oligarchy itself.
Let's just have like some women who are oligarchs too.
I saw this great tweet. It was about, it was like, oh, for the first time, women are at the top ranks of all of the CIA. And someone was like, Slay Queen?
Right, great. How are we supposed to feel about that?
It's great that people are, out there running extrajudicial killing programs. Like, what? Is that what we all fought for in equality? I mean, no.
And if my only options are an oligarchy that is all men or a diverse oligarchy, I'll take the diverse oligarchy. But I think we have the whole point is that we've got another range of options that are far superior to
diverse oligarchy is what describes a professional managerial class, right? I mean, it's actually quite multiracial. If you go look at the ranks of McKinsey, Bain, and a lot of these Silicon Valley tech companies, there's a lot of people of color working in those places. But guess what? It's not about color distinction here. What it's actually about is class. It's about who has power and who doesn't. And those people have disproportionate amounts of power. And it's just great to see in this, in the black voters of 2020, just bucking what they have had shoved down their throats for 8 to 10 years by MSNBC and all these other elite white liberals. And they're saying, no, we're going to vote for somebody who is actually going to represent my class interest. Be that a Joe Biden or be that a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren.
Race has been used effectively throughout our entire history to divide the working class and keep them from having power. That happens on the right, it happens on the left, and it's happening still today. Next up on Rising, how much of a role has Iran played in shaping Iraq's current state?
So according to newly released documents, more than anyone realized. Our conversation with one of the journalists who revealed Iran's attempts to influence Iraqi culture and politics. That's next.